Can you believe she said, "You'll never see them again," and then just times left asterisk? My own sister, with my husband and my children, moving to France as if they had every right in the world. Was I wrong to completely dismantle her life and expose every single lie she'd ever told? Because that's exactly what I did, and I have no regrets, not a single one, even now. You tell me if you would have done the same thing, because I honestly don't know how anyone could have acted differently. It all started, as these things often do, with what felt like a perfect life. I had a wonderful husband, Mark, or so I thought, and two incredible children, Emily, who was 8, and Liam, who was 6. We lived in the house I grew up in, a charming, if a little old-fashioned, 2-story home with a sprawling backyard in a quiet suburban neighborhood. My sister Sarah had always been the wilder, more spontaneous one, always flitting from one adventure to the next, never settling down. She was 5 years younger than me, and while we had our squabbles growing up, I always thought we were close. She'd often come to stay with us between her various travels, sometimes for a few weeks, sometimes for a few months. I saw it as a chance for her to connect with her niece and nephew, and for us to spend some quality time together. Looking back, I can see now how incredibly naive I was. I opened my home, my heart, and my family to a viper. Mark and I had been married for 12 years. He was a kind, steady presence, a software engineer who worked hard, loved our kids, and seemed to genuinely adore me. We had built a life together, brick by brick, filled with laughter, shared dreams, and the comfortable rhythm of everyday existence. Our biggest arguments were usually about what to have for dinner or whose turn it was to clean the gutters. There was no indication, none whatsoever, that our seemingly solid foundation was built on quicksand. Sarah arrived for one of her extended stays about a year and a half before everything imploded. She'd just broken up with another boyfriend and needed a place to regroup. I welcomed her with open arms, happy to have her company. She quickly settled into our routine, helping with the kids, cooking dinner occasionally, and generally being a part of the household. I even encouraged her to find a job, just a part-time one, to give her some structure, and she eventually landed a position at a local bookstore. During this time, I started to notice small things that, at the time, I brushed off as quirks. Sarah and Mark would share inside jokes I wasn't privy to. She'd lean a little too close when talking to him, and he'd sometimes linger a little too long when she was in the room. There was a subtle shift in their dynamic, an almost invisible thread connecting them that excluded me. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself it was just sibling-in-law bonding, or maybe I was just being overly sensitive. They were family, after all. My sister, and my husband. The thought of anything more sinister was simply unimaginable. One evening, I walked into the kitchen and found them laughing, their heads close together over a recipe book. Mark's hand was on her arm, and Sarah quickly pulled away, her cheeks flushing. "Just planning dinner for tomorrow," she mumbled, avoiding my gaze. Mark, usually so open, seemed flustered, quickly changing the subject. A tiny seed of doubt was planted, but I pushed it down, hard. I didn't want to be the suspicious wife, the jealous sister. I trusted them, or at least, I desperately wanted to. Months passed, and the subtle shifts became less subtle. Sarah started dressing differently, more provocatively, always when Mark was around. She'd find reasons to be in the same room as him, always offering to help him with something, always engaging him in conversation. I started feeling like an outsider in my own home, a ghost hovering in the background while their world hummed with a different energy. When I finally confronted Mark, gently at first, he became defensive. "Don't be ridiculous, she's your sister. We're just friends, you're imagining things." His anger felt disproportionate to my mild questioning, and that's when a different, colder seed of doubt began to sprout. Then came the day I found the airline tickets. They were tucked away in Sarah's discarded purse, poking out from a crumpled tissue. 2 tickets, one for Mark, one for Sarah, both for a flight to Paris, departing in 2 weeks. My blood ran cold. My hands started to shake so violently I almost dropped them. This wasn't a girls' trip or a work conference. This was a betrayal so monumental, so cruel, it ripped the breath from my lungs. I felt a primal scream rising in my throat, but it got stuck. replaced by a hollow ache that spread through my entire body. I confronted them both, tickets in hand. Mark looked like a deer caught in headlights, his face paling. Sarah, however, met my gaze with an icy defiance I had never seen before. "We're in love," she stated, her voice surprisingly steady. "And we're taking the kids with us. You're not a fit mother, you're too unstable, too emotional." My vision blurred with tears, rage, and disbelief. "My kids? You can't just take my kids," I shrieked, the words tearing from my throat. "Oh, but we can. They want to come with us. They'll have a better life in France," she sneered, and then the words that would haunt me. "You'll never see them again." The next few days were a blur of tears, screaming and desperate pleading. Mark, cowardly as he was, couldn't even look me in the eye. He just mumbled something about being unhappy and finding true love. True love with my sister. My kids, confused and scared, didn't understand what was happening. Sarah, manipulative to the core, had apparently been poisoning their minds for months, telling them I was always stressed, always busy, while she was the fun one, the one who truly understood them. The sheer audacity, the depth of this betrayal, was a bottomless pit of pain. I hired a lawyer immediately, but the process of international child abduction is incredibly complex and expensive. My lawyer laid out the grim reality. Without significant financial resources, fighting them across borders would be an uphill, if not impossible battle. They had already set up an offshore account, drained our joint savings, and seemed to have planned every detail meticulously. My world, my family, my future was shattered, and I felt utterly helpless. I couldn't afford international lawyers. My modest savings were gone, and Mark had essentially cleaned us out. The house was all I had left, the house I grew up in, the house my parents had left me. It was filled with memories, both good and bad, but now it felt like a tomb. I had to sell it. I had no other choice if I wanted any hope of getting my children back. The thought of leaving it, of losing that last tangible connection to my past was heartbreaking, but my children were my priority. Everything else was secondary. As I began the painful process of sorting through decades of accumulated belongings, I found myself in the dusty, neglected attic, pulling down boxes filled with old photo albums, report cards, and forgotten toys. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and wood. In one particularly heavy box, labeled Mom's Keepsakes, I found an old wooden cigar box. Inside, amidst dried flowers and costume jewelry, was a yellowed newspaper clipping. It was dated the 12th of August, 1983. The headline, stark and bold, read, "Local businessman's wife and child disappear." My heart pounded as I read the article. It described a prominent real estate developer, Richard Sterling, whose wife, Eleanor, and infant daughter, Catherine, had vanished without a trace from their lavish estate. The police suspected foul play, but no bodies were ever found, and the case went cold. My eyes scanned the details, looking for something, anything, that might connect to my own life. And then I saw it. A blurry, grainy photograph of a young woman holding a baby. The caption below read, "Eleanor and Catherine Sterling." My breath hitched in my throat. The child's name was Catherine. My birth name, the name on my original birth certificate, was Catherine. My parents had always told me they changed my name when I was a baby, saying they wanted something more unique, something special. But the date on the newspaper clipping, August 1983. I was born in July 1983. My mother, who I knew as Carol, would have been Eleanor, and my father, David, wouldn't have been my father at all. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Here I was, betrayed by my husband and sister, robbed of my children, and on the brink of losing my childhood home, only to stumble upon a secret that shattered my entire identity. My parents, the people who raised me, had stolen me. The rage, the confusion, the sheer disbelief was overwhelming. Before I tell you what happened next, what I did with this explosive discovery, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have confronted your parents first? Would you have gone straight to the police? Or would you have held on to this information, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash it? I didn't hesitate. I had nothing left to lose. My world had already been ripped apart, so what more damage could be done? I immediately searched for Richard Sterling. It wasn't hard to find him. His name still carried weight in the real estate world, even after all these years. He was 76 now, the head of a multi-million-dollar real estate empire, a titan of industry. I found his office number and, with a trembling hand, I dialed. I expected to be put through layers of assistance, to be dismissed, but when I explained to the receptionist that I had information about his missing wife and daughter from 1983, the line went silent for a moment before I was immediately connected. A deep, raspy voice answered, "This is Mr. Sterling." I took a deep breath, clutching the newspaper clipping so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Mr. Sterling," I began, my voice shaking. "My name is Catherine. I think I'm your daughter." There was a long, agonizing pause on the other end. So long I thought the call had disconnected. Then his voice, thick with emotion, said, "I never stopped searching. I always believed you were alive." We met the very next day. Richard Sterling was exactly as the articles described him. Sharp, distinguished, with an intensity in his eyes that time hadn't dulled. He brought a thick file with him, filled with old photos, police reports, and private investigator notes. He told me the story of his missing family, how he'd spent millions trying to find them, how the case had consumed his life. He showed me photos of Eleanor, a beautiful woman with a kind smile. A smile that looked eerily like my own. He had kept every single scrap of information. Every theory. Every desperate hope alive for 40 years. We did a DNA test, and the results confirmed what we both already knew in our hearts. I was Catherine Sterling, his daughter. The joy of finding my real father, the sudden, overwhelming realization that I wasn't alone, wasn't just the abandoned daughter of a cheating husband, was a balm to my shattered soul. But with that joy came a fierce, righteous anger. My parents, Carol and David, had stolen me from my real family, from a life of privilege and love, and raised me in a lie. Richard, my real time's father, was a force of nature. When I told him everything, about Mark, Sarah, the kids, their flight to France, and my inability to afford the legal fight, his eyes hardened. "No one takes what's mine and gets away with it," he said, his voice a low growl. "Especially not my grandchildren." He immediately put his vast resources into motion. He contacted a team of international lawyers specializing in child abduction, the best of the best, and they launched an aggressive campaign to get Emily and Liam back. He didn't care about the cost, he only cared about family. The lawyers quickly discovered that Mark and Sarah had set up a fraudulent business in France, using the money they'd stolen from our joint accounts. They were living lavishly, but their illegal activities made them vulnerable. While the lawyers were working their magic, I confronted Carol and David. I walked into their house, the house I had grown up in, with Richard by my side and a copy of the newspaper clipping in my hand. Their faces, usually so composed, crumbled when they saw me, and then my real father. "What is this?" Carol stammered, her face ashen. I didn't need to say much. Richard did the talking, his voice cold and unwavering as he laid out the truth of their crime. They had kidnapped me, raised me under false pretenses, and stolen me from my true family. Carol finally broke down, confessing that she had been Eleanor's estranged sister, consumed by jealousy. She had always envied Eleanor's perfect life, her wealthy husband, her beautiful baby. When Eleanor's marriage to Richard had hit a rough patch, Carol saw her opportunity. She drugged Eleanor, abducted me, and staged their disappearance to look like a murder-suicide, then fled with David, who was her lover and complicit in the entire scheme. They changed their names, moved to a different state, and created a new life, raising me as their own, always looking over their shoulders. The confession was sickening, but it brought a strange sense of clarity, a morbid understanding of the monstrous deception that had shaped my entire life. The legal battle for Emily and Liam was swift and decisive, thanks to Richard's lawyers. French authorities, alerted to Mark and Sarah's fraudulent activities and the clear evidence of child abduction, moved quickly. Mark and Sarah were arrested, their assets frozen. The children were placed in protective custody and then, within weeks, flown back to the States and into my arms. The reunion was tearful, overwhelming, and utterly joyous. Emily and Liam were confused and a little angry at first, struggling to understand why their Aunt Sarah and Daddy had taken them away. But with time, therapy, and a lot of love, they began to heal. Mark and Sarah faced serious charges in both France and the US. Sarah, for child abduction, fraud, and a litany of other offenses related to her history of grifting and deceit. Mark for child abduction, fraud, and aiding and abetting. Their lavish new life in France quickly turned into a nightmare in a French prison. I haven't heard from them, and I don't want to. My parents, Carol and David, faced their own reckoning. Richard, ever the businessman, chose not to press charges for kidnapping, instead opting for a civil suit that stripped them of everything they owned. Their lives were utterly ruined, their lies exposed to everyone they knew. Her face, the last time I saw it, was a fiery red, contorted in a mixture of disbelief and utter defeat as the judge read out the verdict in the civil case, confirming they had to repay every single penny of the money Richard had spent searching for me, every single penny I had lost in the process, plus damages for emotional distress. It was astronomical, impossible for them to ever pay back, and it meant they would live out the rest of their lives in absolute poverty. It felt like justice, cold and unyielding. My life is completely different now. I'm Catherine Sterling, not just the woman who lost everything. I'm learning to navigate my new reality, building a relationship with my incredibly generous and loving father. He's been an absolute rock, not just financially, but emotionally, helping me piece together the fragments of my past. My children are thriving, adjusting to our new, stable life, and, thankfully, they are too young to fully grasp the depths of the betrayal, though we are open and honest with them in age-appropriate ways. I moved into a beautiful new home, one that doesn't carry the heavy burden of my past, and I'm slowly, tentatively, beginning to trust again. This whole ordeal taught me that even in the darkest moments, when you think you've lost absolutely everything, there can be hidden truths, unexpected allies, and a fierce resilience within yourself you never knew existed. It was a painful, horrific journey, but I emerged from it stronger, with my children safe, and with a family I never knew I had. So, if you've been through anything remotely similar, know that you're not alone, and never give up. Life has a way of throwing curveballs you never expect, but it also holds surprises you could never dream of. Like this video if you were on my side through this whole crazy ordeal. Subscribe for more stories like this because trust me, the world is full of them. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. I'm eager to hear what you think. I'll see you all in the next story.